President Trump scolded Australia's ambassador to the US, Kevin Rudd, who was at the cabinet table, following a question by our political editor, Andrew Clennell.
Been concerned in Australia that it's taken 9 months to get this meeting. Have you had any concerns with this administration, with its stance on Palestine, climate change, or even things the ambassador said about you in the past, the Australian ambassador?
I don't know anything about him. I mean, if he said bad, then maybe he'll like to apologize. I really don't know. Did an ambassador say something bad about him? Don't tell me. I don't. Where is he? Is he still working for you?
Yeah.
You said bad?
Before I took this position, Mr. President.
I don't like you either. I don't, and I probably never will.
Bueno, señores, una vez más, Donald Trump ha protagonizado una desastrosa conferencia de prensa. En esta ocasión con el primer ministro de Australia, Anthony Albanese. Lo que pasó, un absoluto desastre. Donald Trump fuera de sí, confundido, enfermizo. Una escena tan incómoda que ni los periodistas sabían si reírse o preocuparse. El tipo comenzó hablando de los cortes de pelos de los reporteros. En serio, señores, ese fue el punto de partida en esta conferencia internacional. Miren esto.
President Trump, so a question to both of you, if you don't mind.
I love his haircut. I'm going to try that. No, I love it. Go ahead.
So, as we all know,
Pues bueno, desde ese punto, los periodistas ya querían comenzar con algo serio. Y comenzaron a hacer unas preguntas, y hay una, en concreto, que me pareció completamente legítima. Y es que le preguntaron esto: ¿por qué Trump se niega a enviar misiles Tomahawk a Ucrania? ¿Por qué no apoya las sanciones contra Putin? Como sí lo están haciendo otros republicanos en el Senado. Y bueno, señores, solo observen la forma en la cual trató a esa periodista. Totalmente repugnante.
The First Lady has done such an amazing job on the Ukrainian children who were abducted by Russia. Would you support Senator Lindsey Graham's bill to declare Russia a terrorist state? And you have within your power, you're the most powerful man on earth. Why don't you just enable Ukraine to finish this war tomorrow?
Well, if you knew anything about what you were talking about, you'd be able. You do. I don't think you do. Really, I don't think you do because it's a little more complicated than that. But it sounds easy. We're in the process of trying to make a deal. If we make a deal, that's great. If we don't make a deal, it'll be a lot of people are going to be paying a big price.
President Trump, so a question to both of you.
Cada vez más desquiciado. La cosa siguió empeorando porque otro reportero le preguntó por qué es que estaba imponiendo aranceles a Australia, siendo que el propio ministro australiano había señalado que existe un enorme superávit comercial a favor de Estados Unidos. Y bueno, Trump, en lugar de responder, empezó a hablar de aviones. Así es, amigos. Tienen que comprar nuestros aviones. Escuchen esto.
Mr. President, the Prime Minister mentioned that there's a trade imbalance that's very heavily in America's favour. Why does America slap such heavy tariffs on a friend and ally?
Well, we don't, yeah. Well, we do in some cases. We do in many cases because we've been treated unfairly. But actually, the tariffs are very light. The one thing is you buy a lot of airplanes, so that helps because you buy a lot of the beautiful Boeings, the best of the Boeings. Boeing, and by the way, Boeing is really doing well. They have lots of orders, and they're really doing a great job. They make a great plane. But Australia, because of its location, which is great, but one of the things dictated by that location is you have to order a lot of airplanes. So I guess we have that advantage. They need a lot of airplanes in Australia, and that gives us a little bit of an advantage.
Luego otro periodista australiano intentó insistir. ¿Usted consideraría levantar esos aranceles en algún momento? Y bueno, Trump se lanzó a uno de sus típicos monólogos absurdos sobre que él ha detenido 8 guerras y que va a detener 9 más, totalmente inventado, sin responder absolutamente nada.
Given the trade surplus that the US enjoys with Australia, would you consider lifting the tariffs that you've imposed on Australia? And can you give us any details about the critical...
Yeah, well, the tariffs have been amazing because, tariffs have been really a reason that I was able to settle almost all of the, I've settled 8 wars in 8 months. Not bad. I have one more to go. It's Russia, Ukraine, and I think we'll get there, but it's turned out to be nasty because you have 2 leaders that truly hate each other, You can't have it all, right? They hate each other beyond all else, and it makes it actually a little bit difficult. But we try, of the 8 deals, I would say because of tariffs, 4 or 5 of them were settled. It's an amazing thing, the power of tariffs in terms of our country. But tariffs have always been used against us. We never use them against anywhere else. And now you have a president that for national security reasons and other reasons is using them, and we've become a very rich nation again and a very secure nation again. But we've also become a nation that used that power of tariffs and the power of trade to settle 5 of the 8 wars that I settled. I settled 8. I'm very proud of that. Nobody else has settled 1. I don't think there's been an American president that settled 1. I think there probably hasn't been outside of the 2 countries involved, or however many are at war. I don't think there's ever been an outside country that settled a war, period. So I settled 8 in 8 months. I'm proud of that. Now, in the meantime, I'm running a country that's right now we're the hottest country anywhere in the world. We were dead. A year and a half ago, we were a dead country. Now we're the hottest country in the world, economically and otherwise. So, but I will say this, Australia pays very low tariffs, very, very low tariffs. In fact, Australia pays among the lowest tariffs.
Si eso ya les parecía raro, esperen a lo siguiente. Le preguntaron sobre el supuesto alto al fuego en el Medio Oriente. Que ojo, ni Israel ni Hamas lo firmaron. Y el acuerdo prácticamente se está desmoronando. Casi 40 palestinos han muerto en las últimas horas. Israel sigue bombardeando Gaza y hasta el Líbano. Pero claro, Trump sale con que Hamas tiene que comportarse, como si eso resolviera algo.
The Middle East, and now it's all, we have a little situation relatively with Hamas, and that will be taken care of very quickly if they don't straighten it out themselves, because they're in violation of their agreement.
Después le preguntan sobre los agricultores estadounidenses, especialmente los productores de soya, los cuales, por si no lo sabían, están quebrando uno tras otro. Y mientras tanto, Trump ha regalado $40,000 millones del dinero de los contribuyentes a Argentina. Y bueno, en esta ocasión también a Australia, ¿no? ¿Qué responde Trump? Quiero que compren soya. Yo hablaba con Xi Jinping todo el tiempo. Biden nunca lo hizo. Ojo, ¿no? Lo cierto es que bajo Biden, China sí compraba el 60% de la producción de soya de Estados Unidos, mientras que bajo Trump las ventas se desplomaron por esta guerra comercial fallida. Y los productores de soya, por ejemplo, son los primeros afectados.
Korea, China, and I will have a really fair and really great trade deal together. I want them to buy soybeans. They stopped buying our soybeans because they thought that was punishment. And it is punishment to our farmers, but we're not going to allow that to happen because I made a great trade deal with China, a $50 billion trade deal, and they were great about it. They were doing everything that they were supposed to do. And then when Biden came in, I used to call President Xi all the time to say, thank you, or you're not buying enough. In other words, they were supposed to buy. Biden, do you think Biden ever called him? I don't think Biden ever called him. You think Biden lied awake at night thinking about trade with China?
Luego le preguntan por qué es que tardó 9 meses, que es prácticamente desde que empezó su segundo mandato, en reunirse con el primer ministro australiano, porque no lo hizo en el G7. No se reunió con Modi de India, ni con nadie. Y cuando un periodista le dice que tal vez es porque no le cae bien el ex primer ministro Kevin Rudd, quien, ojo, lo criticó públicamente, pues bueno, Donald Trump se descompone, totalmente fuera de control. Vean ustedes.
Go ahead.
There's been concern in Australia that it's taken 9 months to get this meeting. Have you had any concerns with this administration, with its stance on Palestine, climate change, or even things the ambassador said about you in the past, the Australian ambassador?
I don't know anything about him. I mean, if he said bad, then maybe he'll like to apologize. I really don't know. Did an ambassador say something bad about him? Don't tell me. I don't. Where is he? Is he still working for you?
Yeah.
You said bad?
Before I took this position, Mr. President,
I don't like you either. I don't, and I probably never will. Go ahead. No, you went. Go ahead, behind you, President.
Más tarde, Trump suelta que la guerra entre Rusia y Ucrania, al parecer, no afecta en absoluto a Estados Unidos.
Unbelievable. It's a bloodbath. It's the worst since the Second World War, the worst number of people. And, you know, it doesn't affect us in any way. We don't pay anything because now they pay us for the weapons that they get. The NATO is paying us for the weapons, as you know. It doesn't affect. I guess you could say that's a positive thing. They pay us, but I'm not interested in that. I did straighten it out.
Para rematar, dice que no cree que Ucrania pueda ganar la guerra. Podrían ganar, pero no lo creo, es lo que dice. Así, señores, como si estuviera hablando de un partido de golf.
Mr. President, on the war that you haven't solved yet, the Ukraine-Russia situation, have you now locked in a meeting? And can you explain, just a few weeks ago at UNGA, you said that Ukraine could possibly win the war and
well, they could.
Territory, but now
they could still win it. I don't think they will, but they could still win it. I never said they would win it. I said they could win. Anything can happen. You know, war is a very strange thing.
Luego vienen las preguntas sobre el tema de China y Taiwán. Le preguntan si es que considera importante la alianza AUKUS entre Australia, Reino Unido y Estados Unidos, con la finalidad de poder contener estas ambiciones de China en la región. Y bueno, Trump responde que no cree que AUKUS sea necesario, o sea, esta alianza. Y ojo a esta joyita, porque dice que Taiwán es la niña de los ojos de Xi Jinping. Hablamos de la misma frase que él utilizó antes para referirse a Putin y a Ucrania. Escuchen.
Mr. President, your Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, in his Shangri-La speech in, I think it was May, warned about the potential likelihood or threat of President Xi ordering an invasion of Taiwan. 2027 is also the year that Fleet Base West is supposed to start rotating those US and UK submarines. Do you see AUKUS as a deterrent for China in the Indo-Pacific?
Yeah, I do. I think it is, but I don't think we're going to need it. I think we'll be just fine with China. China doesn't want to do that. First of all, the United States is the strongest military power in the world by far. It's not even close. Not even close. We have the best equipment. We have the best of everything, and nobody's going to mess with that. And I don't see that at all with President Xi. I think we're going to get along very well as it pertains to Taiwan and others. Now, that doesn't mean it's not the apple of his eye, because probably it is. But I don't see anything happening. We have a very good trade relationship. We're going to have a very good, I think, when we leave South Korea, it could be wrong, but I think we'll end up with a very strong trade deal. Both of us will be happy. No, I don't see that happening, no.
Luego, como siempre, se dedica a insultar a Biden frente a los medios internacionales. Es algo que lo hace constantemente, ¿no? Sin pudor, sin respeto y sobre todo sin conciencia de todo el daño que eso le hace a la imagen de Estados Unidos.
He was an incompetent president. We had an incompetent president, but you don't have that anymore.
Y claro, no podía faltar su proyección. Él dice que China no va a sobrevivir económicamente, que China se está hundiendo, aunque en la realidad vemos que China ha diversificado sus mercados, vemos una economía creciente, ¿no? En cambio, Estados Unidos enfrentándose a una crisis estructural muy seria.
Almost like saying, we don't want to do business with you, but it's probably nicer. Saying you're going to pay 158, 157% tariff is a nicer way of saying that we don't want to do business with you. And if they don't do business with us, I think China's in big trouble, I'll be honest with you. I think China is... I don't know that they even make it. I really do. I believe that they're in big trouble, and I don't want them to be in big trouble. I want them to do great. I want them to thrive, but we have to thrive together. It's a two-way street.
Y justamente cuando uno cree que ya se terminó la conferencia, vuelve a lo mismo. que él logró la paz en el Medio Oriente, porque según Trump, él dijo que haya paz y entonces hay paz. Así de simple.
You just alluded to the violence in the Middle East. What steps is the administration taking to maintain the ceasefire?
Well, a lot of steps, and right now it's in the hands of others. You know, we have 59 countries that agreed to the deal. We have a peace in the Middle East for the first time ever. We made a deal with Hamas that, you know, they're going to be very good, they're going to behave, they're going to be nice, and if they're not, we're going to go and we're going to eradicate them if we have to. They'll be eradicated. And they know that. So they went in, and I don't believe it was the leadership, but they had some rebellion in there among themselves, and they killed some people, you know, a lot of people. But this is a violent group. You know, you probably noticed over the last 100 years, this is a very violent group of people. And they got very rambunctious, and they did things that they shouldn't be doing. And if they keep doing it, then we're going to go in and straighten it out, and it'll happen very quickly and pretty violently, unfortunately.
Pero bueno, Donald Trump dice una cosa y la realidad es completamente distinta. En solo un día, más de 50 palestinos fueron llevados muertos a hospitales en Gaza. Israel sigue bloqueando ayuda humanitaria. Hamas retoma control de zonas destruidas. Y esta gente sigue llamando a eso una tregua. Así es, amigos, una conferencia desastrosa, pero también un reflejo perfecto, ¿no?, de lo que se ha convertido el país bajo este tipo de liderazgo. Ahora bien, señores, hablemos de un poco de malas noticias, porque las cosas como lo son. Esto fue confirmado el día de ayer. Donald Trump ahora oficialmente podría mandar militares a Portland, Oregon, incluso en contra de las decisiones de las autoridades locales. Y todo esto gracias a un fallo judicial que, sinceramente, pone los pelos de punta. ¿Cuál es el contexto rápidamente antes de ver la noticia? Dos jueces que, ojo por cierto, quiero recalcar, son colocados por Donald Trump a dedo estratégicamente en los tribunales, acaban de aprobar el uso de la fuerza militar en Portland, Oregon. Así es, amigos, designados por el trumpismo, van a permitir que el presidente despliegue a la Guardia Nacional en Portland y seguramente va a ser sin límites. Escuchemos esta noticia.
Breaking news on Donald Trump's growing unchecked power and the judiciary that is failing to rein him in. A federal appeals court just ruled that the president can send National Guard troops into Portland, Oregon against the state's wishes. 2 Trump-appointed judges on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals sided with the man who appointed them, arguing that the deployment is justified because, quote, state and local law enforcement have been unable or unwilling to assist the government's efforts to protect the ICE facility in the city. In their own court documents, attorneys for the city of Portland and the state of Oregon wrote that protests around that facility had been small and largely peaceful for months, actually. Listen to this dissent from Judge Susan Graber, a Clinton appointee. Quote, given Portland protesters' well-known penchant for wearing chicken suits, inflatable frog costumes, or nothing at all when expressing their disagreement with the methods employed by ICE, observers may be tempted to view the majority's ruling, which accepts the government's characterization of Portland as a war zone, as merely absurd. But today's decision is not merely absurd. It erodes core constitutional principles, including sovereign states' control over their state's militias and the people's First Amendment right to assemble and to object to the government's policies and actions. Joining us now is Angelo Corazon. He's the president and CEO of Media Matters, and Ankush Khardori, former federal prosecutor and senior writer for Politico magazine. This was outrageous.
It was. This one, Ankush, really hit me in the gut for a number of reasons. And I want to focus in on what Simone highlighted from the court today, noting state and local law enforcement have been unable or willing to assist the government's efforts to protect the ICE facility in the city. Protect them from what? I really would like to understand what the judge thought was going on in Portland, that they would come to that conclusion that Donald Trump needed to inject federal troops into the city to protect the ICE facility from what? What evidence did he have? Turn on your television. You live in the Ninth Circuit. You're not that far from all the action. So help me understand, because this is where I land. I land on the Supreme Court decision that said all Donald Trump has to do is make something an official act, and the courts will go, yes, sir.
This is in line with that sort of view, which is that if the president says something, the administration says something, we take it at face value. I have to say, reading the opinion was very, very striking because they didn't just take the judge's ruling below and her factual findings. They just basically adopted every single representation that the government's witnesses put in the court below. They just cited the declarations, assumed it was all true, and then compiled, not just, to your point, like what is going on now. They went back months to like catalog events that they then combined to say, well, now this deployment is warranted because even in June, there was a couple of days or whatever when a certain road may have gotten shut down or something like that. But already another judge on the Ninth Circuit has called for, sua sponte means of his own volition, a sua sponte has called for a vote to hear the case en banc. And the Ninth Circuit.
What's en banc mean?
All the judges.
All of the judges, sorry.
Do you think that'll happen?
I think it probably will. Just because the ruling is really, really over the top. It is two Trump judges. The Ninth Circuit, the balance of the judges shifted a little bit, but it's still mostly Democratic appointees.
So much of this, even though this is being decided in the court of law, becomes about the imagery and about what people understand this to be. To your point about the fact that they just took the representations at face value, this is what a lower court judge had to say about the protests in Portland. On September 26th, the eve of the president's directive, law enforcement, quote, observed approximately 8 to 15 people at any given time out front of ICE, mostly sitting in lawn chairs and walking around. Energy was low, minimal activity. If you watch Fox News, that's not the impression you would get of what is happening in Portland. And by the way, that judge was a Trump appointee.
Yeah, I think the misinformation part of this is incredibly important on multiple levels. One, at the court level, and Ankush is right, the appeals court didn't accept the finding of fact. They just accepted the representations from government. And what's scary about that is that NYU just put out a study where they found that 35 courts have pointed out that the government has lied. The administration has lied to them. 35 courts have called them out for giving them false information. So you shouldn't be taking it at face value at anything. But this is because it's sitting on top of this larger cauldron of lies that has been cooked and simmering on Fox News in particular. And what they've been doing, and all of those people at the Antifa hearing that Trump did, that meeting at the White House, they are all ostensibly right-wing media figures. Many of them, they call themselves journalists, but they're media figures, they're characters. And they have been pumping poison into the ecosystem for weeks. So because they do their own podcasts and streams, they're on the ground there. They have been not just creating these little flashpoints of imagery or pointing back to B-roll from 2020, saying there's fires burning and recycling that narrative. And of course, Fox will pick it up and run with it. But the largest story that they're putting on top of it is that it is chaos on the streets. And so that has been recycled in the right-wing echo chamber for weeks on weeks on weeks. And these are all figures that are on the ground there that are weaving together this false narrative. It is then being laundered and elevated through Fox News, then validated by the White House when he brings them to the White House to actually have this big meeting about Antifa and all this insurrection stuff that they're worried about. But it's all lies. It's all a fabrication. And it then gets finally legitimized by the court that sort of takes that spin and puts a stamp of approval on it when it makes these sort of judicial decisions.
Judge Graber spoke to the judge that dissented in the case. She spoke to this today, quote, in the dissent. We have come to expect a dose of political theater in political branches, drama designed to rally the base or to rile or intimidate political opponents. We also may expect there a measure of bending, sometimes breaking the truth. By design of the founders, the judicial branch stands apart. We rule on facts, not on supposition or conjecture, and certainly not on fabrication or propaganda. I urge my colleagues on this court to act swiftly to vacate the majority's order before the illegal deployment of troops under false pretenses can occur. Above all, I ask those who are watching this case unfold to retain faith in our judicial system for just a little bit longer. She was talking to me because I'm wavering. My faith is wavering in the judicial system. Donald Trump is testing the public. And by virtue of the public, he is testing us all, including the courts. And this is the test on whether we will accept a president using military force as a political tool. And today, at least 2 of the judges in the Ninth Circuit said, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that actually the point that Angelo made is a really important one, which is the credibility of the government in these courts has been just plummeting over the course of the year. And it's not just the lawyers who are walking in. I saw, Attorney General Pam Bondi did an interview on Fox last week with Sean Hannity, and it was really unhinged. She said that, Governor Pritzker doesn't care about Chicago. She described protesters as akin to MS-13, organized crime. She implied that they could start up a criminal investigation.
Pues bueno, básicamente estos jueces aceptaron sin cuestionar el argumento por parte del gobierno de Trump de que Portland es una zona de guerra. Según los propios registros del tribunal, las protestas habían sido pequeñas, en su mayoría pacíficas, durante meses. Estamos hablando de entre 8, 15 personas frente a un edificio, la mayoría gente que estaba sentada en sillas de jardín, no había caos, no había incendios, amigos, no había violencia descontrolada. Entonces, ¿por qué justificar un despliegue militar? Bueno, la respuesta es política. Donald Trump lleva desde su primer mandato queriendo utilizar esta narrativa, ¿no?, del desorden, del caos en las calles. ¿Por qué? Porque eso puede fortalecer su imagen de autoridad, puede alimentar el miedo, cosa que es lo que necesita, ¿no?, para mantener esta base radical que lo acompaña. Pero lo más preocupante es que ahora estamos viendo ya jueces que están más que dispuestos a poder proteger esa narrativa de Donald Trump, más que proteger a la Constitución. Entonces, esto no es solo un error judicial, amigos, es una señal. El sistema, como venimos diciéndolo hace meses, está empezando a doblarse ante la presión del poder. Si un presidente puede mandar tropas a una ciudad pacífica solamente alegando la etiqueta de seguridad nacional, ahora ya que lo va a impedir hacerlo en otra ciudad, cualquiera que simplemente ya no esté de acuerdo con él. La jueza Susan Gruber, que fue la única en disentir, lo ha dicho de la manera brillante, ¿no? Esta decisión erosiona los principios constitucionales fundamentales, como lo es el derecho de los estados a que puedan controlar su propia milicia, el derecho a las personas a poder reunirse, poder protestar, la libertad de expresión. Y claro, pues tiene toda la razón, porque esto no solo es Portland, es un precedente que se va a utilizar en los próximos meses y en los próximos años. Yo sé que algunos saldrán a decir que si el presidente considera que hay peligro hay que actuar. Pero no, amigos, así no funciona una democracia. El poder presidencial no puede basarse en percepciones o en lo que Fox News diga que está pasando. Si el argumento para mandar tropas se basa en propaganda y no en hechos, estamos en un terreno muy peligroso. Lo que empezó como un despliegue temporal en Portland está así, en ese mismo punto de convertirse en una práctica normalizada. Utilizar las fuerzas federales como herramienta política. Directo al autoritarismo. Pero bueno, amigos, ¿qué opinan ustedes? Les pregunto, ¿será que vamos a dejar que se normalice que un presidente utilice al ejército para imponer a su voluntad? ¿Ustedes creen que este tipo de decisiones judiciales pueden ser el giro autoritario completo en Estados Unidos? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en la caja de comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme en este video. Recuerden, como siempre, déjame tu like, comparte el contenido, déjame tus comentarios y suscríbete a nuestro canal. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.